Okay, thanks very much for joining us today for James Mortimer's intriguingly titled talk, Being Eaten Alive. As I just said, we are recording these sessions, so you're very welcome to have your screen off if you don't want to be recorded. I'm going to briefly introduce James, and then he will talk for about half an hour, and then we will have questions at the end. Oh, sorry, hang on. Yeah. Okay, so James Mortimer is a Bath-based artist who studied sculpture at the Bath School of Art and Design, receiving the Kenneth Armitage Prize for Sculpture. He's best known for his paintings depicting obsessively detailed landscapes and interiors, where human figures and animals interact in provocative and macabre scenarios. The primordial and the visceral are recurring themes in recent work, with erupting volcanoes, burning houses, and large bodies of water featuring heavily. Around all these, nude and partially clothed figures cavort with and attack one another, or are seen being savaged by dogs or eaten alive by sharks and crocodiles. The theme of being eaten alive being a recurring obsession. So if I hand over to you, James, James is going to talk about his work for the first half and around the theme of being eaten alive. And then he's going to share his experience of establishing a pretty successful career in selling work and working full-time as an artist.
Okay, so is that me now?
Yeah, that's you.
Okay, well, I'm just going to press share screen. So can everyone see what's on my screen? Sorry,
not yet.
The end of this. There we are. That'll be something to go on with.
Have you pressed share screen?
Have I? Share.
Brilliant. Yeah,
Wrong
great.
one. Can you see that?
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Okay, well, yeah. So I've called this talk "Being Eaten Alive" for the reasons Jessica said. But also because she sort of needed a sound bite, and I thought it was a good name for a talk. And I just had my wisdom teeth removed, so there's probably some sort of oral fixation going on last week. But I've called it that because it's sort of general sort of motifs I'm dealing with at the moment with my work. This kind of comedic violence and a lot of crocodiles and these sharks and crocodiles with millions of teeth sort of cropping up continuously. And this all sort of visceral stuff, and then on top of that you have volcanoes going off in the background and burning houses and God only knows. So I'm just working out. Still on that. Oh God, sorry.
If it's easy, you could
sorry, it closed itself. Let me try opening that again. I was just opening up this painting Baboon to get us started. So this is a more recent one, which I think epitomizes a lot of what's going on in my little world. And so Jessica and I were discussing this one when I was talking about putting this talk together. And we were talking about how there's a sort of slightly narrative element to these paintings, but I sort of shy away from that because I think paintings have no narrative ability, but a lot of narrative potential. So in there, you've got this sort of priapic baboon eating this bird with its eggs next to it. And then you have here this sort of strange homunculus type man who's drowning someone. And if you were to put a sort of narrative spin on it, you would say he's maybe drowning people for reasons best known to himself, and then they're floating off downriver to be sort of pecked at by birds. And then over here you have this scene of men chopping down this tree, while a woman sort of stalks off with her strange, again, homunculus-like children. And Jessica and I were discussing about, who these characters are and what they're up to. And I think they're just sort of these strange, unself-aware sort of archetypes of people who sort of don't really have any sort of propriety or any standards of decorum, and just sort of do lots of strange things with sort of no regard to social norms. So it kind of going to that primordial element of is that what I mean? It's very sort of primordial. There's very few clothes, because I think they kind of ground you in a time or a place. And so yes, it's all very animalistic, and of course there are lots of animals. Sorry if I keep zooming in and out. And yes, I don't know if Jessica, do you want to butt in on me whispering away?
I do actually. I was interested in how it's interesting, the idea of them not having any decorum, because in stylistically they're quite a sort of smoothly hewn group of, they look quite calm as well in their murderous activities. So is that a conscious decision to kind of have that tension between the action that they're performing and then the way that they're kind of the mannerisms and the way they're painted?
Well, I guess I try to make it look sort of beautiful and have these, obsessively sort of careful and smooth compositions with a lot of the work. And I think there's probably an element of trying to juxtapose, the horrible with the beautiful. So which is probably, an old trick. So you see something that looks beautiful, and then you realize when you're looking at it that it's full of, plenty of sort of blood and gore and God knows what. Although they're not really that gory. It's kind of more of a comedic violence than, like a slapstick sort of jaunty postcard more than anything. Although more recently I kind of decided to go the whole hog, and I've done these more sort of daring pieces where people are a bit more overt. I mean, here you have Gunman, where man's just been sort of shot in the shoulder, although in the original one I had his head sort of clean off, but I thought that was going a bit too far. And then on this one, which I'm not sure how good I think it is as a sort of finished piece, but there you have this sort of pile of headless bodies and this man and woman kind of standing next to them. And again, it's that narrative thing. Your brain is filling in the moments leading up to and after that, whatever's going on. And
I'm interested in from the images that you've shown so far, the people who violence is being enacted on all seem to be male. Is that right in all of your work, or are women the subject of violence as well?
Oh God, that's a tough one. I'm trying to think. Let's see if I can find anything now. That appears to be the case, but
so it's not a conscious.
It's not conscious, and maybe there's nothing to that. It's maybe I'm placing myself in these paintings slightly, but I don't know. Maybe I don't want to end up, being me too'd or something by having a load of. I think there's a lot of that anyway. That painting here looks quite horrible because it's sort of got all these beheadings and whatnot. But open any book or watch a film and it's full of all sorts of atrocities, and they're usually committed against women in detective dramas and stuff like that. But no, it's not conscious, but maybe it's refreshing for that not to be the case.
Yeah. And I had a question about the environments that you create and whether they are all part of the same world or whether there are sort of parallel environments or worlds, fantasy worlds that you kind of return to.
Yeah, so it is a kind of made up world inside my head, but it's more of a, if it's not too pretentious, a kind of metaphor for the world around me, because that's what artists do. They take the world as they see it and reform it into a way that's more pleasing to them or more interesting to them. So it's not so much bringing someone into some kind of sort of Hobbit, Lord of the Rings fantasy world, which would be a completely different thing. It's maybe shining a very harsh light on elements of reality and putting it together in a way that is provocative and maybe returns people to reality more violently than before.
So you're kind of working instinctively rather than making an explicit kind of psychological representation of an experience or what have you.
Yeah, it's very it's not didactic in the way that I experience something and then make a painting about it the following Tuesday. I think the moment when that happens is in the sketchbook, because painting is a very long haul and there's lots of different emotions going on. So if you ask what are you feeling when you're painting, it's nothing, because you're listening to an audio book or the radio or music or something, and you're just painting away for hours and hours. But with drawing, so I've got a sketchbook there, and that'll be very quick, simple ideas just when they suddenly come into your head. And I think that's where the emotion is, and the sort of being in the moment is when you're sketching out an idea. I mean, some people do paint in a expressive way, but it goes from the expressive drawings where an idea comes into your head suddenly, and then you try and get as give as much fidelity to that original emotion with a painting.
And can you give me a sense of how big your canvases are? Do you work at a similar scale for most of your work, or are they all different?
It depends. I think different ideas and different compositions and whatnot want a different size painting. So this one, which is called Lake Islands, is 8 foot long and 6 foot tall. And the same with this one, can't remember its name, a dog landscape or something. That's 6 foot tall, 8 foot long. But then, that's probably about 12 centimeters tall, although it's just sort of a quick more of a fun one. And that's the same size. And that's probably about 3 foot by about 4 foot or something. So they're all different sizes.
And the 8 by 6 foot, how long would that take you to paint?
Oh, that took ages. I was working on other things, but I probably, start to finish in about 7 months or something. I do about 10 paintings a year of different sizes. So some will be big and some small, and it's usually about that amount.
And do you tend to work on them concurrently?
Yeah. So, when I'm sick of working on one, I can move on to something else and come back to it, and I can put something away for a few weeks and come back to it and be more refreshed. I don't know whether it's more efficient or not to do it that way, but that's how it ends up.
And when you're creating this body of work within a given year, do you have an intended collector who you're making it for, or you just kind of, you know, working on it with the hope that it'll one day sell or be exhibited?
It'll generally be for an exhibition. I'll have spoken with whatever gallery I'm going to be working with, and they'll say, they don't give much input. They say, can we get X amount? And I'll say, okay, I'll take this long, and then we kind of work together to work out when I can have a show. If I'm doing a solo show, or if it's a mixed show, they'll say, can you do something for this show? Or we're doing an art fair or something like that, and I'll try and do it that way. I've only done one commission. Really, I don't have a picture of it, but it was of the Garden of Eden, and it came out really well. But I think I work at my best when I'm exploring my own ideas, because I've done a couple of sort of commissions which just came out looking rubbish because it wasn't what I felt like painting.
Which gallery are you with, James?
What was that?
Which gallery are you with?
I'm working with two galleries at the moment, the James Freeman Gallery in Islington and the Cato Gallery in Hampstead, and I've been working with them sort of on and off for the last sort of, I think, seven years.
So do you find that's an added pressure to have them requiring and asking for work? Does that add pressure to you, or are they quite lenient with the time scale?
I think it's a negotiation. We'll have worked it out what I can do. I mean, they want. I mean, in there, for them, they want everything yesterday, and they want 50 paintings or something. But so I have to beat them down and be realistic. Sorry, did that answer the question? I can't remember if there was a second part to that.
Can I ask one more question? I'm really enjoying the muted palette that you use, and particularly the use of greys in the work. Is this a palette you've been using for quite a long time?
Yeah, I think I'm becoming slightly more colourful with these sort of bright blues, and I mean, I think that baboon painting is quite colourful. It's got these yellows and pinks and things, but I think that came from studying sculpture and doing a lot of drawing. So with sculpture, it's all about form and depth, and I noticed when I was doing sculpture that the paintings became less about colour and more about how much depth and form and shapeliness there was. But I've had a lot of criticism. My father's kept complaining, oh, you've done another grey painting. So I think I see colours maybe more vibrantly than other people, because I see some things as being very colourful, and then people come in and say it's not. So
I feel grey is a very useful colour, and grey come in many forms. You know, it's not just grey, is it? And I think it really can help solve a painting using grey. Do you find that?
yeah, I suppose you don't want to be kind of overwhelming. And I mean, a lot of the world is sort of grey. I'm looking out the window and I'm seeing trees and hills and buildings, but there's no real sort of bright colours. I know it's autumn, but yeah, there's a lot of beauty to just sort of getting textures. So here you've got these rocks, but if you zoom in, you can see there's sort of yellows and greens and browns and splatters of bird poo, and you know, there's a beauty to that. And oh, someone just walked in through the door. So yeah, I like these sort of earthly tones. They're quite calming, and they can offset the brighter colours well if you use them in, you know, proportionally. But I'm not too conscious on it. I just, you know, try and paint in a way that's pleasing to my eye.
James, can I ask, by the way, everyone, feel free to jump in and ask questions, or if you don't want to ask yourself, put it in the chat box and I can ask for you. But I just wanted to ask about, I guess maybe in relation to colour, because you're talking about the colour choices that you make being quite calming. And there's a real sense of the apocalyptic in your work, both more so to the body in a way, I suppose, but you talk about volcanoes and that kind of dramatic environmental event, but everything does feel sort of in the background quite sort of still and calm. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Well, it's I maybe it was me going to a Catholic school or something. It's all very, you know, apocalypse and doom and end of times and very Old Testament. But I mean, I think I first painted a volcano after going on holiday to Bali, and then our flight got held up because a volcano went off, and you could see it from our room. And but again, I don't sort of see a volcano and then go paint a volcano. But I've sort of, again, it's probably not, trying to think, there one with a volcano here. Oh yeah, here we are. Yeah, I suppose it's sort of extremes as well. You know, it's got these, that's what I enjoy. I've got these sort of calm landscapes, like you say, and all this stillness and these winding rivers. But at the same time, it's, you know, the most extreme thing is going on. You've got a volcano going off, you've got houses burning, and, you know, lives being ruined, and piles of skulls, and, you know, God knows what. And it's probably a comedic juxtaposition as well as me sort of enjoying these extreme things. I've realised. I realised though, when I was doing a sort of clear out the other day, that I found some childhood drawings, and to my annoyance, it seems my artistic themes have never changed, and so it's a bit self-indulgent to show childhood drawings. But there we are, a volcano when I was probably about 7, and then a man's head being blasted off by I think a bird in the window, and then jungle scenes with crocodiles, more crocodiles, and lots of monkeys. So I looked at this and thought, oh, I'm in a permanent state of regression. I'm not actually changing the sorts of things I'm working on at all. So make of that what you will.
Well, there's a lot to explore in that, isn't there?
So stick to what you know, I suppose.
I just feel that you know, we kind of, I don't know, as people we evolve in different ways, but I feel like with my practice, I'm constantly returning to the similar sorts of themes, or they might come out in different ways, but you know, some things you just can't let go of. I'm like early warning system architecture, interestingly. But I wanted to ask as well about your influences, and whether you're influenced by other art forms or reading, or you know, what sort of influences go into your image making.
Well, I think I'm quite a magpie. Like, if I see, I mean, I'll go to any art museum and look at any art, and I'll look forensically at everything, and if there's something that I think someone's done very interestingly, or there's something I love, I'll either store it in my, you know, mind and just appreciate it, or I'll think I can use that. You know, it's that Picasso thing of stealing whatever you can. But I quite like outsider art as well. I'm on a Facebook group called Terrible Art in Charity Shops, and it's just an unending mine of absolutely amazing things, because I think there's nothing more sort of boring than a kind of well done sort of watercolor where someone has so much that level of skill where they're able to erase their personality from the work. But with this very kind of amateur stuff, you know, these aren't trained artists or anything. They're just people who some idea has been stewing in their mind and they had to get it out of them one way or another. And so they're very raw and full of emotion, and I absolutely love it. So I've got a little folder here with some choice examples. You know, here you've got a centaur with a motorcyclist, and a lot of them do have very biblical, you know, primordial and visceral sort of themes to them, which, you know, so it must be some sort of universal consciousness that attracts human beings to these things, you know, rather than anything being too sort of specific. And some are just sort of odd or incredibly funny. And
that one looks like Frank Sidebottom.
It does. And there's a lot of aliens. People seem to love painting aliens, and some well-intentioned portraits, and a lot of cats and dogs with human faces. Particularly love this woman. And
do you see yourself as an outsider artist?
Sorry?
Do you see yourself as an outsider artist?
No, but I think there's a very blurry line between these two things. I think Grayson Perry talks about it a lot. There being the kind of the only difference is that maybe an outsider artist didn't go to school, or they just didn't go to art school, or they were just sort of a one-off, or they never had that recognition. There's a lot of snobbery around, you know, these sorts of things, and so I think it's a pretty loose term. I don't know how you define it, but also whether, I mean, sometimes it's just very bad art, but in a kind of charming way. You know, I mean, someone's done a portrait of one of the gremlins from the Gremlin films. I think that's lovely, because obviously they were compelled to do that. And I mean, this is actually quite a good portrait, but there's a sort of strange horror to it. And Jesus Christ here with boss eyes. I mean, I love nothing more than those sort of badly restored pieces of art you see, you know, that end up in the news every so often. And again, sharks, death, brooding landscapes, strange dogs, Harambe the gorilla. You know, it's an intriguing look into the human soul, which, you know, is what art should be.
Yeah, they're great. Can we move on, James?
Yeah.
To hearing a bit about your experience kind of establishing a successful career where you're able to work full-time, pretty much full-time as an artist, and get your income from actually making and selling work. Because I think, you know, we discussed the other day about how sometimes there seems to be this kind of mythical screen between, you know, people not sort of sharing the realities of their practice as artists. And I think it's really interesting to sort of figure out how different artists make their journeys and make their practice work for their own kind of lifestyle and so on. So could you talk a little bit about how you kind of started off, and things like how you started connecting with galleries?
Yeah, sure. I've actually written this down rather than ad-libbing incoherently like I've been doing so far. Yeah, like Jessica said, there is sometimes a lot of mystery, you know, of how someone you know, got to where they are or whatever. I remember being very irritated in art lectures at art school with people being asked, how did you actually make a career in this? And they just sort of floated around saying, oh, it just sort of all came together. Oh, I just visualized it, or but obviously you need to have some kind of ethereal, part of you that just has to be an artist. But there are some practical things as well. I mean, I was told that you had to sleep to the top, but that's never come up for me. So I can only imagine I'm too plain for that to have been an option. But as Jessica said, this is my experience, so I'm extrapolating from that, and there are lots of different art careers. But the way I started was, so I began at around 19 or 20, just sort of painting what I was painting anyway. And I, managed to get involved with little things here and there, local group shows, this, that, and the other, just putting work in wherever there was an opportunity to do so. And but the first thing I sold was to my art teacher when I was 16, to Miss Parker. It was a Cornish seascape for £30 that she gave me for it, and that felt very, very good. That was quite a good motivator.
I've still got it on my wall, James.
Oh, you're there. Hi, Tara.
Hello, lovely.
So selling, just a little thing, it's really motivating. So when I was about 20, I was putting things in these shows, and I think they were generally priced at sort of £50 to £100. I think there was a bigger one that was about £200. And when, those started selling a bit, because they were probably quite pretty, and so they're, built up a little bit of a market. I realized the market at that time seemed to be what I can only describe as ladies who lunch. That they bought something to go with their sofa, or just because they felt like buying something, and it was that kind of affordable level, fairly pretty, but still, a bit edgy, because that's the kind of work I did. As for pricing, there was a good piece of advice from Grayson Perry. I don't know if it applies now, but he said, if a painting takes a week to do, look at what a week on the dole will pay and price it as that. Because at the beginning, you do sort of have to eat humble pie and undersell yourself a bit at first, because it pays off in the long run if you can build up a collector's base. So I did that for a while, and I was studying sculpture. I went and studied sculpture, so I was able to paint at home, and I thought I'll probably be more likely to make a career as a painter than a sculptor, but I wasn't entirely sure. So I was able to, live while at uni and paint at home. And then at some point, I got lucky, and somebody who had a gallery in Pietrasanta in Italy said, oh, we'd love to have you in your work in the gallery, send us a couple of pieces. And so that was my foot in the door with a gallery, albeit in, the middle of Italy. So I worked with them for about a year or so, and then I got a solo show with them when I was 23, and that was my sort of, big thing. I sold a couple of things. It didn't go that well, but then I thought I would. So that's how I got in with that, and then I thought I really would prefer to work in England and in London specifically, because that's how I saw it working. So then it was how to approach a London gallery, and I don't know if I came up with the idea or whether someone else, but I thought the simplest way was just to print off a sort of catalogue of my work. So it was like that, just from some website online. So I printed off a load of these, and so there's a painting from the time on the front, and then inside there's a pretentious photo of me smoking a pipe with a manifesto, or just a bio, and then it's literally just some work in chronological order. And I made a list of the galleries I thought I had a chance and hell of being involved with, and sent those off with a cover letter. And if I could find the name of the person I'm supposed to be contacting, I did. And so I thought that was the simplest way. And luckily, a couple contacted me back and said, yeah, we can put your work in this mixed show. And I've been involved with them since. A year or two into that, I was given a solo show. But they all said, nobody sends a booklet like that. And I thought that was the most simple way of just showing your work. They said people send them CDs or memory discs, or they email them and they forget to look at them. They open the email once and never again, or they come in with a portfolio, which they're working, and you can make an appointment to do that, but generally I thought they have that, they can put it on a table, they can pick it up, they might put it in a drawer for 2 years, and something would come out of it if someone likes what you're doing. So that's how I got involved with the galleries. Obviously the price increases over time. So as I said, I was starting off at £30 with my art teacher, and at the beginning it was sort of the £200 mark. But I think they've sort of gone up by about 10-20% a year since the early days of little stops and starts. And it's just gone up incrementally, rather than sort of coming out of art school all guns blazing, wanting £10,000, which you could get lucky with that. But I'd be terrified that that'd be the only sale I'd ever make, and then I'd have to lower my prices again, and that never looks good. So yeah, they started off dirt cheap, and then by art buyer standards, and then worked up over time. Obviously it didn't happen as smoothly as all that, but those are the things that worked. And one thing that was very good, there's a fantastic book called How to Survive and Prosper as an Artist Without Selling Your Soul, by a woman called Carol Mitchells. And it's just a very simple bullet point style book of what you might need to know. I think there's a more updated edition, because it has all of that, sending a catalogue, how to speak to a gallery, this, that, and the other, the different kinds of art careers that exist. Because I'm not a business person in the slightest, so I didn't even try to work it out for myself. I went to other people and asked, what do I have to do to make this work? And luckily was given fairly reasonable advice, because there's a lot of snobbery at art schools, particularly of it's somehow a dirty word to want to actually live off your work. So yeah, that's how that came together. I think that's fairly straightforward. Well, one thing I would say, it's not patronizing, but when you do have a show, is to do some PR for it, because you can contact these PR people, and they and if you're doing something interesting, they'll contact the art publications, and if you're doing something interesting or it's a slow news week, they might give you a little coverage, and it it looks good and it's fun. And so yeah, just do whatever you have to do. If you have to blackmail people or kidnap someone, do whatever it takes, really. Did that sound okay, Jessica?
Apart from the kidnapping bit, can't endorse that as
you do whatever you have to do, and then obviously it goes without saying, aside from all that, make the best artwork that you can, and don't censor yourself, and feel free to be weird with what you're doing.
James, how much time would you say you spend on actual painting, and then what proportion of your time do you spend on the sort of more administrative sides of your practice, and also like research and looking at shows? Obviously now it's a bit different, but
well, research would just be what I do anyway, you know, because I love going to art museums and things. So that's just a given. But I think I feel very guilty about having some sort of whimsical career. So I do a sort of 9 to 5 of painting, and I put the hours in, and I do little experiments of how I can be more productive or whatever. So at the moment I'm working an hour and a half with a 20-minute break, and then an hour and a half, and do 4 sessions like that, because apparently you can only focus on a task for an hour and a half at a given time, and it's something to do with your REM cycle or something. But that seems to be working. So yeah, sort of Monday to Friday, morning till evening. But I'm very behind on admin. I mean, there's so many emails I haven't got to. I, you know, I do my best, but yeah, what I need is a load of Damien Hirst style assistants to do all that for me, probably, because I'm hopeless with any of that.
that's 2021's aim then.
Well, not really, but
thank you, that's brilliant. James, oh sorry, go on, what did you want to say?
Oh, well, I mean, I was talking about motivating yourself and you know, doing the best work you can. I mean, I know there's artists here and it's probably a bit patronizing, but you know, in terms of market research, I think people often look at what's in commercial galleries and think, oh, I should do something like that. But that's really you know, don't go about it that way, because, well, some of it's very nice, but some of it's awful. You know, just look at the greats and you know, whoever you admire, you know, all those sort of Renaissance people were all flesh and blood as well. But I do have a brilliant thing Damien Hirst said, if I could just read that out quickly.
Please do.
Yeah, well, he was interviewed in the Idler magazine, which is a fantastic magazine about the art of living, and I found this quite galvanizing, and it's about about enthusiasm for what you're doing. And he said, so I see these he swears like a sailor, so sorry, I see these art students making little paintings, and I say, go get a studio and make big fucking paintings, and they say they can't afford it, so they have to do these little paintings. Then I say, it's never going to happen. Well, if they wanted drugs, they'd steal money. Why can't they go and steal money for paints and make some big fucking paintings? If you get a big space and make shit paintings on a big scale, then people have to take you seriously. Just do black on white until you can afford colours. You don't need oils, just hit the ground running. You get points for effort. I mean, take from that what you will, but I like the enthusiasm of that.
There's definitely something about being prioritizing what you want to be in life, and also just being bold with it, which is obviously exactly what he has, you know, had success from. Yeah,
you know, don't censor yourself. You know, turn it up to 11. You know, being subtle probably won't get you noticed. I mean, I'm not particularly bombastic person, but you know, there is something to that. The end of the interview wasn't as inspiring, because his 26-year-old supermodel girlfriend turned up and they zoomed off in a sports car, him with a big grin on his face. So I mean, it's easy for him to give people advice, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay, well, on that note, if you want to stop sharing your screen, I think we will see if anyone has any additional questions.
Yeah.
If you do you want to just unmute yourself and say something? Oh. So Andrew Mania has a question. Are you a procrastinator or an efficient user of time?
I think I'm probably naturally a procrastinator, but then a sense of guilt or terror of not making money to eat will spur me on. A deadline generally helps. But yeah, I think the motivation. There's something about having your fear behind you. So behind me is the fear of everything going horribly wrong, and the fear of ruin. And in front of me is me working towards that, working away from that. And quite often people have their fear in front of them. If I go and pursue this art career, it's very scary, and things will go wrong, but it's very comfortable behind me. So yeah, I guess you might sound a bit psychobabbly, but I think there's a lot to be said for that, working that out somehow.
So terrify yourself into efficiency, basically.
Yeah, basically. And look online for ways of working efficiently. I find the working for an hour and a half and having 20 minutes where I can just sit and stare out the window, is pretty helpful.
Thank you.
I am a procrastinator.
Any other questions from anyone?
I've stunned everyone into silence with that Damien Hirst thing.
Yes, I do have a question. I'm sorry I missed the beginning, and so maybe you treated that question. But looking at your work, it does remind me a lot late medieval, early Renaissance painting, and I have the feeling it's like religious painting without religion or without God.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, you can't escape, those religious paintings, growing up with a sort of Western art tradition and going to art school. And I think you also grow up on the art that's already inspired by those things. So I absolutely love the Where's Wally books. And they're obviously incredibly Boschian and have these scrupulous sort of landscapes and scenes of all these little figures going on in them, and then you discover Hieronymus Bosch, and then you go, that's another thing. So yeah, I'm definitely guilty of loving those artworks and trying to do my own spin on them, at least at first. I mean, I've probably done things which are almost rip-offs, but my own, with my own soul put into them. But yeah, I'm not religious at all, but there's so little great sort of art in that's not been tainted by kind of religious aspects to it. Was that all right? So
Thanks.
Another question from Andrew: are there self-portraits in the work?
No, I don't think so. I've never been very self-portraity, but there's probably elements of me. Going back to child paintings, when children draw and things, they do a man, a woman, and sometimes they'll do themselves. So they're probably more archetypes of people, but it's never directly me in a landscape doing this or that. Although sometimes I use my own body parts as references, because there's a mirror in the studio, but I wouldn't say they're directly any sort of self-portrait. I'm hoping other people see them. What am I saying? Well, yeah, you are going into someone's interior world of art, and so it speaks to other people's interior world, and I think that's what's going on. I hope that makes sense.
Is your studio at home?
Yes, and I don't know whether that's good for productivity or not, but yeah, it's upstairs and the internet's terrible. That's why I'm down here with the pretentious bookshelf behind me. But yeah, I'm on a 2-floor flat, and the top floor's the studio.
You were saying to me in another conversation that you actually found lockdown less productive than usual, weren't you?
Yeah, I got a bit annoyed of all these people who are ultra productive and made their greatest artwork, you know, they've ever made. But I think I was, you know, fairly productive when we had, you know, hobbies and friends and the pub and things like that. And I just found myself getting a bit worn down. I was working continuously, but I just didn't finish anything that was any good. And then as soon as we were able, I went on holiday to Greece for a week and came back refreshed. So I think that's all I needed. I got quite stale, and I thought I would be fine because I'm alone painting all day anyway. But yeah, I think we need civilization around us to inspire us and to help with productivity as well, you know, hobbies and friends and things.
Yeah. Question from Martin Roberts. If you're commissioned to do a painting, do they give you a time frame as to how long the art will take, or do they ask for it at a particular time? So you covered that a little bit earlier, but you were saying that you don't tend to work to commission, but when you have a show coming up, you'll negotiate with gallery. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll have a vague time frame, so it'll be a negotiation. Otherwise, it might never get done. With this Garden of Eden painting I did a few years ago, which was for this really lovely woman, and I already had who had helped me early on in my career, had bought a few paintings and sold some to her ladies who lunch friends. And so she was a staunch Catholic and wanted a big Garden of Eden, and I said, well, I have an idea that would work for it. And then like a week later, a 7-foot-long canvas arrived at my house. And she said, has the canvas arrived? I said, yes. Say, okay, you have 2 years to make this painting. So on that occasion, I had a relatively specific time frame, but then I just left it there and didn't do anything to it until I had about 4 months left to go. So yeah, it's a negotiation. If I don't have any time frame, I'd probably never finish something.
Did she pay a deposit? Sorry, I know that's really.
Yes, and I wish she didn't, because I wish she didn't pay a deposit, because then when I delivered it, there was no bundle of cash at the end, because I'd already been paid and I'd forgotten all about that and spent it on something else. So yeah.
Has anyone got any other questions? I've got one, a last one, yeah. Perhaps, because we're nearly out of time, which is, what have you got coming up?
Well, as I said, I had a really dry patch during lockdown and didn't particularly finish much. So I'm doing a little mixed show with the Cato Gallery in Hampstead in April. I mean, touch wood, it may not happen. We'll all be dead. So, sorry. So yeah, that's the next thing I'm working towards, and then after that I'll be working towards a solo show next year with the Freeman Gallery. That's the plan. So I have vague plans, but lots of various things were cancelled, and you know, who knows what's going on. I'm making work and working every day. I'm working on this now, which is actually a man being eaten by a crocodile there. So that's nearly finished. So that's something.
Thank you. So I think if nobody has any other questions, we will leave it there and say thank you very much again to James for sharing all of that really fascinating information, and to hear a bit about how you work is really interesting. So thank you, and thank you all of you for coming. We have another talk next week, and it's Steve Burden who is with us here in the audience. Steve will be talking about his paintings, which are inspired by his childhood growing up on the Pepys estate in Deptford in South London. So join us at the same time, same link, and thanks again. Bye.
I'll just say, yeah, I hope that was all right. Sorry if I was a bit incoherent at the beginning, but yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.